Hi, fellow tea lovers. Settle in, because we've got a story. I'm Nell.
And I'm Rose, and today we're bringing you the tea.
Across eras.
Alright, so we got to see the Decameron...
Part of it.
Alright. So, very, very excited that Netflix decided to take a run at the Decameron. Yay!
Right. Once again, the Decameron to me, I'm like, that horrible book I had to read in college. So...
I love that it's having this revival. It's still the lusty, naughty times. And it always has been.
So, it's set in the year... Tell me again.
Set in the year 1348. So, just a little brief background. The Decameron, if you haven't listened to our Poets and Plagues episode...
You should.
You should. The Decameron is a set of 100 stories, and the framing device for the book is that a group of young nobles is escaping Florence in 1348, which is the peak of the plague. It's when it arrives in Florence.
I thought it was Firenze.
Yeah, no, that was very cool. In the show, they were using some of the Italian words for place names and for
Okay. Yeah, because at one point in my notes I wrote down Padrona, and is that the right pronunciation? I don't know.
Padrona, yeah. So that's like saying my lady or...
Yeah, and then I was like,
lord.
oh wait, that's just their title.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I did that too. I actually did think it was a name for a little while. Because, I haven't read the Decameron, for funsies in a very long time. I couldn't have told you a lot of the plot of the stories, but I didn't want to read beforehand. I wanted to see how they did before going back and refreshing, which I honestly that's advice I'd always give.
Right. So on Friday, we sat down and watched the first 2 episodes. And then Saturday, I think, we watched the 3rd.
Yeah, and I'm so impressed so far. Same thing as the Firebrand episode, actually, just as an aside. They're going to be spoilers. We're not going to...
Obviously, there's spoilers. The Decameron is really old.
Yeah.
And this copy in front of me, I know it has to be old. This is the exact copy I have because it's $7.95.
That is a Penguin edition, isn't it? Nope, Signet Classic, which I believe is a subsidiary of Penguin. Penguin has a lot of the literary books. It has publishing. Yep, Penguin for the classics.
Right. The Decameron's also pretty dense.
Yeah, so the framing device is that these young, hot people are saying, screw all of this plague, we're going to go spend some time in the country. And so to entertain themselves, everybody has to tell one story per night. So there's 10 people, and they're each telling a story per night, so it's 100 stories for the book.
When we sat down to watch it, I wondered, and I asked you eventually, are we getting into the stories here, or is this...
They haven't at all in terms of them telling the stories. I think they did one scene during the wedding feast where they were playing games, and so there was a storytelling competition.
Yeah.
But that's really the only time they've referenced storytelling so far. Now, you gotta stress we're halfway through it.
Yeah,
so.
But I don't think it would be productive TV to make 100 episodes.
Oh, no.
Because you have to be like, okay, I'm definitely going to get a long run on this.
Yeah, that's banking out a lot. You could, if you wrote it a certain way, you could even incorporate the same actors and still be telling the different stories that they're all telling.
That would Drunk History?
Yeah, but that would just be a really different show, and that's not the way they decided to go. I respect that.
In the TV show, where Netflix has got us learning, about each of these nobles who've come to the summer villa.
Yeah, so they all get this anonymous invitation from, not anonymous, but this invitation from this grand, wealthy guy that none of them really know.
Just some distant family relations for most of them, it seems like.
Right, and really the social set that they all exist in, it's all pretty much like an extended family anyway. They all run in the same circles. They all have similar pursuits and concerns. Mm-hmm. It's the country club people.
Yeah. So the opening, the rats.
I love it so much. The rats are, the animation is just adorable, but the rats are what did it.
Yeah. The very fun animated sequence of rats was, honestly, in retrospect, it should have tipped me off to the fact that there was going to be some gross scenes.
It's a plague story. There's going to be some gross.
Yeah.
Just is. There's 3 kinds of plague that you're going to encounter at this point, which is the bubonic we've all heard of, with the things under your chin and in your armpits and the boils and pustules everywhere. The next is the pneumonic, which is going to act more like a severe and horrendous flu. You're not going to get the same kind of swelling of glands, but it's the same bacteria that's causing it, and so it's still going to kill you. That's the one you tend to survive from. As like, you still have a chance with any of them. It's not a good way. It's like in the single-digit percentage chance of survival, I think. And then you have the septicemic, which the opening scenes, the father of Philomena, she and the servant switch places. Her father has signs of the septicemic, where basically your blood vessels are bursting and you're becoming one giant bruise.
Is that why he had the black fingertips?
That's why his fingers were black.
Okay. So then we cut to like this monk. Tell me, what's the deal with this guy? I called him Quigley the whole time, and I don't know why. I just heard y'all saying it.
It's so funny. No, he's not a monk, actually, although I can
he's not a monk. He's a scholar.
He's the scholar, yes. He played Mrs. Quigley's son in Harlots, and he did a fabulous job, to where I really just do think of him as Charlie Quigley.
Yeah, okay, now I remember.
That had nothing to do with it, but like, because my partner and I had watched Harlots a bunch of times, it's Quigley!
So, him and his doctor come like bursting out, and he does not want to be dragged to the countryside. He is an intellectual. Surprise! He did not think he was going to be an intellectual, correct?
Right. What was his original goal?
He was like the nephew of some... and his uncle had 2 sons, and they've all died now.
Right. He's a reluctant title inheritor.
I wouldn't say he's reluctant.
Oh, nobody's reluctant about the money, but the duties that come with that are not necessarily out. This is like that Bridgerton thing when the guy comes home and like, well, what if I just never marry anybody? And everyone's like, so then you're going to kill the dynasty, and that's kind of your only job, and that's why you get to live the good life.
Right. So Quigley is like super into his schooling.
Right, because up until this point, he was allowed to just...
by now.
He was allowed to be a student.
Mm-hmm.
And then these 2 people that are running the estates that allow him to be a scholar die, and so somebody has to pick that business up, or no more money for anybody.
Yep.
So,
and he does not want to leave. He's also got like a bit of an incel vibe going on.
Oh, and I think they did that on purpose.
Okay.
I really do.
Yeah. So when Philomena's servant... Lecheska, that's right. So when Lecheska shoves the flowers up her nose to block the smell, honestly, that was the first thing that made me gag.
Those were probably rue flowers, which were meant to ward off evil vapors in general, but definitely witches. So that you could put rue over your door, or pin a little twig of rue to your shirt, and witches wouldn't necessarily ward off a very powerful sorcerer, but if a witch was just sort of considering you as a target, maybe they would look the other way. It's like light touch anti-evil.
Okay. So the plague and witches, obviously. Same.
Obviously. So the plague is blamed on a billion things, and which sounds like, we look at it now and go, oh, those silly medieval people. It just, they thought it was the cats. Well,
right.
They weren't that wrong. It was the fleas on the cats that was coming from the rats. So, It's just that without the idea of germ theory, you're dartboarding. You're trying to find anything to explain the world collapsing.
So I wrote down a couple of things you said, so I'm going to read them back to you to remind you. No, they're all good.
I have to say the experience for you must be irritating, and I apologize, because I sit on the edge of my seat yelling like, that's so great, that's perfect!
It's good to know what's going on.
I'm glad you don't get wildly irritated.
If I did, we couldn't do this podcast. Okay, here's my list of questions, or statements. The fashion is reflecting today's style.
Yes, that was something that I listened to. She's a fashion historian that was doing like a rundown of, I think, Jane Austen movies. She put forward this really great point that most historical movies skew their costuming towards the fashion of the audience that they're trying to speak to. Because you want it to be aesthetically pleasing. You want the princess to be in the pretty dress, and pretty is different in every decade. And so even though you're representing historic styles, so you do have some things that you can't change, like there are basic little costuming pinpoints, like having overdresses or tied-on sleeves, or everybody wearing a head cover.
Yeah.
In some way, shape, or form. Maybe it's just like a starched ribbon. Those are wild, and I love them. Or maybe it's an actual cap, but people having their head covered, that's a real thing. But you can play with how they're covered, and then you have a lot of range there.
Yeah.
But they were totally doing that. Their dresses are absolutely, make a couple of adjustments here or there and it would be a gunny sack, which is totally popular again. Totally the things I tried to avoid getting as hand-me-downs, by the way. Y'all are weird.
Nope.
No, but fashion is cyclical. That's why I don't have to rebuy things very often.
That means you keep things for a long time, which is great in some aspects.
Yeah, no, there's others that my partner has a story of this trench coat that I had that was my dearest love. It was this gorgeous, buttery, yellow tan kind of trench coat that was like a double-breasted, fit me like a dream. And there was a little bit of packing tape holding it together on the back. Not a lot. It was fine. It required occasional repairs, but it was worth it. And then one day it was just gone.
Oh no, that part. Really
I didn't even get to say goodbye. I'm not saying he was wrong. Don't tell him that.
I know people who adore some of that.
And I'm a little salty about it. It was like 10 years ago, and I'm still like,
Right. So the hood, we talked about this. You said the hood is accurate.
The hood was so great. So Misia is the servant of Pampanea.
Yeah.
And she's this really intense servant that's like, I'm not just fulfilling my duties, I'm godly and I'm crazy.
And she's also in Dairy Girls.
Oh, is she?
And that intense character type is similar of her character in there too.
She's good at that.
Yeah.
She's very good at the intense. The first time she's introduced, she's wearing this hood that, it's a normal hood shape in the front, but then it continues down over the shoulders a bit and has the long pointy thing at the back. That was the one that we actually talked about in the Improbable Fashion episode that eventually ended up turning into the chaperone, which is the...
literally on pins and needles, waiting for you to say, Lyropipe! That was the other thing I wrote down.
So this is the type of hood that eventually turns into the chaperone hat, which you can see in Jan van Eyck's self-portrait. Do yourself a favor, Google it if you haven't. It looks like he just threw a towel up on his head out of the shower.
It's on our webpage.
It is the height of fashion.
Yeah, it's on our webpage under that episode.
Yes. But that hat evolved from that type of hood, people extending the lyropipe more and more, which is the pointy bit up on the top. And so when I saw that, all I did was like kind of sit up a little bit and go, lyropipe!
I wrote that down.
Because it was just, I love the word. But it was, so over time, people are rolling that whole deal up and then using the long arm of the lyropipe to kind of tie it around. Almost like turban fashion, but it's so much more than a turban and yet less than, it's not comparable. Like it's a shirt turned hat, and then people wanting to emulate the look of the working man turned it into the ridiculous merchant class hat. It's one of the funniest headgear evolutions I think you could possibly get. That's why I was excited.
So the person wearing that is Misia, who is the servant of, what's her name?
Pampanea?
Pampanea sounds good to me. And Pampanea is going out there because she's going to marry the guy whose villa this is, and his name's Leonardo. They've never met. She's really terrified because, number one, she's 28.
Which is just ancient in the noble marriage market.
Yeah. Number two, she's a lot. And number three, she has this mole. Yes, you heard me right. She has a mole.
It's a huge problem because that could be interpreted as something called a witch's mark, which is where, if you are a satanic-leaning lady of the era, you would suckle the devil when you meet, presumably among all of your other activities. Snack time.
Can you define suckle for me?
Suckle. As in suckle as though it were your breast, but it's the idea that if you have a familiar or some sort of demonic companion, you're going to have to be feeding it blood.
So it's like a hickey.
It's like a hickey. Like, it's where you have fed your demonic companion your blood. It's all based in farce anyway, so don't expect it to make more sense than that.
Interesting.
But if you had a strange mark on your body, it really could tank your marriage chances because you could possibly be a less than holy bride. And religion is not just religion. The mythology of the other world lives right side by side with visible reality. In the Middle Ages. I think that's probably the biggest paradigm shift that we have to get around thinking about medieval history, is because they did believe in things in a different way. Like, their reality was just not the same set of proofs that we use. Yeah.
So her servant, absolutely off her rocker, wild, like she has like a manic energy almost. Like if she was my friend in real life, I would be like, so, you know, I used to feel a lot like you did. and I got medicated. You don't have to.
Yeah, this chick
but
has
I'm
a character.
just telling you, it's an option. And yeah, that's how her Dairy Girls character is also. And she's just like all over the place, and she's like, "You're gonna be great, honey." At this point, we're meeting all the other characters. Back to Philomena. Philomena is wretched in the beginning, right?
Reminds me of a wicked stepsister.
Yeah, her dad is dying, and she's just like, ew. Her servant apparently loves the dad. It seemed like his name's Eduardo. It seems like he treated them really well.
Yeah, because even though she is not his own family, she's still been there her whole life.
Yeah.
People grow up within the same household. You have whole families serving other families. It's a very symbiotic relationship, and that's not to say that there isn't a power imbalance there, but just even the fact that he talks to her like a regular person, it says something about their relationship.
And they definitely had like
I would call it a fatherly relationship.
Yeah, there was a thing going on, and then his daughter's just out there being wretched and being like, let's just let him die. In fact, when the invitation comes, that's what she says.
Not convinced he's dead.
We did not see if he died or not.
I said, that's Netflix rules. If you have not seen a body, all bets are
right. Because she won't let the servants go in and say goodbye or anything. She just like bounces.
Yeah, she just comes out, announces that he's dead, and she's in charge now, and we're going.
And she's a total brat, and not in the good, cute way that people say now, like Kamala Harris is brat or whatever. Not that way.
Not in any kind of
she's a total jerk while her servant is like driving their little cart out, and they get in a fist fight. Yeah, no, because Lychesca just snaps. Just everything. Because every one of the people in this show is dealing with their world collapsing. Yeah. Their worldview just becoming non-existent. And April 2020. Yeah. I think we can all have a little bit of sympathy there. So everybody snaps in a different way. So Philomena snaps in a society way. Like, why isn't the world catering to me anymore? I can't handle it. Snap, pop. Lychesca, like, the only things that made life worth living in a very crappy life full of hard work and kind of mean people is disappearing, and you're going to continue being mean. So she's snapping in her own way. And yes, she should. Bam! I mean, I know which one I sympathize with, but they both did that for reasons. Yeah, of course. And in the meantime, back to the scholar guy. His name is Tindaro. Well, all I wrote down is that he is such a dork. Honestly, he reminds me of, do you remember me telling you that story about this doctor that thought that he could ward off the plague by living in a clay oven with rue stuffed up his nose and 50 hot water bottles ready to... He reminds me of him. Yeah. So him and his doctor show up, and then we have another couple, and it's like Leonardo's... There's like some sort of family connection that the family is trying to play up as the money and fortune like disappears. Yeah, you're getting fewer and fewer heirs because everybody's dying, and so inheritance is going wider and wider to like your second and third and fourth cousins. Yeah. And you pay attention to those things as a member of the nobility because that's your ticket in. Yeah, so this is his like third cousin or nephew or something, and his bride show up. And he's like just very kind of average seeming, but his wife. And I'm looking at her doing this in the beginning. Right, and Rose is like, yeah, and she's considered normal. She really was. She was actually an extremely desirable bride. I mean, not the not having sex part. They're celibate. But to be honest, that's not even that impossible within a marriage relationship. You had people that were having sex through a hole in the sheet because it was more Christ-like at that particular time. No, not at all. But you could absolutely, swear a period of celibacy in order to go on a pilgrimage or to participate in a holy fast. Your cities are absolutely filled with monasteries and abbeys, and your religion and your mythology are living next door to you and keeping you company in bed. And so talking to God in that way, it's just not even considered unusual. But she is like so pious, and she doesn't want to do anything without a sign. And her husband, he seems like he knows how to play that well. Also, he does just seem kind of genuinely kind in the way that he's like, yes, dear, but let's steer away from this thing that's going to kill you. All right, dear, we'll do the other thing. He's trying to protect her from herself, but not in a mean way. And I thought that says a lot about how much he cares about her. Yeah, he does care about her, but not sexually. Not her. Well, how do you deal with homosexuality at that stage?
in
I have
street.
no clue.
You hide, because in Italy especially, there are some scary-ass punishments for homosexuality for males. Weirdly, ladies, not always not a problem, but it wasn't codified. Like, feminine homosexuality wasn't legally codified as sodomy.
Yeah.
But blowjobs were. So you could have a heterosexual blowjob and still be considered guilty of sodomy, even if you'd never touched another man.
Interesting. But speaking of female homosexuality, this is where we find out Misia has been, what's her name again?
Pampinea.
So Pampinea says something really rude, and she's like, this must be so hard for you since you had to leave your little friend behind. Cut to, Misia has snuck her absolute plague-ridden, the pox kind, friend out there in a barrel.
Yep, she has brought the plague to the plague retreat because she couldn't bear to leave her love behind. You know, not exactly the worst motivation, but gonna kill everybody.
Right. And in the meantime, who arrives at the door but...
Lycheska.
But Lycheska, except Lycheska says, hi, I am Philomena.
We skipped the best part of that scene when they get into
tell it and then
the fight. So they get in a fight.
The bread.
The servant Lycheska gets out of the cart to give some of their bread to a homeless man on the side of the road.
And it's some of her bread. Like, it's her portion
rations.
of her bread. Right,
yeah.
Okay.
They get into this huge fight where, Philomena is, well, I'm just as deserving of bread as anyone, so give me your bread. Like, she's just trying to throw her weight. She's trying to push the issue that she's in charge.
Yeah.
And always will be. And Lycheska snaps and pushes her into the river.
Bye-bye.
And that was my favorite part, because the guy she gave the bread to looks up and goes, fuck yes, senora. I love the way that they mixed the Italian in, just subtly. They use vernacular language with finesse, I think, throughout the whole thing. Because it's very clearly they're not trying to sound like they're in 2024. They're not trying to sound like they're in 1348. But the in-between that they hit is super good.
It has been good.
I really liked it.
So Lycheska panics, finally gets back in the carriage and takes off, or the little cart and takes off, and there's like creepy dudes along the way.
Yeah, because the whole countryside is roaming with people that are dealing with the apocalypse. At that level, it's the zombie apocalypse. It's not materially different.
Right. So finally, when Lycheska pulls up at the castle, she is now Philomena. And she's like, hey guys, what's up?
You guys have never met me. I'm definitely a member of the landed nobility. Let's do this plague.
Yeah, so we've got everyone there except for Leonardo. Leonardo
absent the whole
is
time.
not there, but his two remaining servants are. It's hilarious almost if it wasn't so...
It still is.
It's
sorry,
hilarious.
Gella's humor counts.
It's hilarious because these two servants are running the entire estate. And I noticed like how beautifully kept the gardens were. And how every time they turn around, they're telling the one lady who knows how to cook to create a feast.
There's an incident with a suckling pig when Misia declares that Pampinea must have suckling pig, and there's absolutely no time to prepare it, and everybody's telling her, like, look, you just can't do that. So, I will nearly make it hotter! Like, she's just not taking no for an answer.
And we find out that's because she has left her love in the barrel, and then she dies.
Yep.
Well, when she finds her, she's dead.
Yeah.
She comes back and finds her dead.
So her crazy now no longer has a focus, and I think that's going to get more interesting as we go along.
And she goes to dump the body over the side, or is this in the second episode?
I think we're in the second episode with that.
Okay, because before the end of the first episode, the creeps that were passed on the street break into the estate. And there's a lot of viscerally gross things, including what I wrote down as WTF Peacock.
I love it so much.
There was like a styrofoam, probably not styrofoam,
yeah,
peacock head coming out of this roast.
It was very...
Chicken?
No, that was a roast peacock. At least that was what they were showing. I don't know if it was in actuality. Nope, absolutely. Peacock was on the menu, considered delicious, of course very fancy, and actually the traditional way to prepare it was to pluck it, roast it, put the feathers back on, and have saved that head to put it back on so that it looks like you've carried a live peacock to the table.
Dadgummit.
That's absolutely
so
accurate.
This whole peacock head is like on a...
Like a skewer kind of deal.
A pretty big one. And
Lycheska.
new Philomena. New Philomena is like, twinking the head of it, which comes in handy later when she uses it to stab one of the guys to death.
I just didn't know that I needed to see a peacock stabbing in my life, but I sure did. Because that was amazing. That was just, the farce of it is so spot on Boccaccio. Wild. I love it.
It's wild. And then episode 2 comes up and real Philomena is back from the dead.
Yep, because of course. And that's actually, for me, the more questionable portion of the story, because the amount of clothing that you're wearing at that point in time, like, there's a reason drowning was one of the biggest causes of death in the Middle Ages. Because you were wearing, as a routine, between 3 and 5 layers of natural fiber, heavy woven stuff.
Yeah.
And so the minute that gets soaked with water, you're carrying an additional up to 100 pounds. You almost never have the stamina, the strength, or the training to get back to the surface of the water. Like, once you're in, you're gone.
Yeah.
She comes back, and it's amazing.
And obviously,
Francesca
is shocked. But she's saved by basic husband guy.
Yeah, so the guy that's married to the Holy Roller comes in. He's not a shit stirrer, but he's a guy that seems to understand the game of nobility, I think, better than any of them.
Yes, he does.
So he keeps kind of sidling up to people like, hey, so if you want this effect, you might try this.
Right. And he had already figured out, right?
He suspected. He had kind of noticed, like, when somebody asked for a glass of water, she jumped up.
Oh, that's right.
And then had to make an excuse as to why. And just her general manners, you act differently when you raise money.
Yeah.
That's always true.
And then they go off on this whole, like, medical quackery thing with, like, the doctor. And I remembered you said rich people get worse healthcare. And, I mean, they're, like, neutralizing the plague. Remember that?
Yep.
And then he was using an onion to ward off
the miasmas.
The miasmas.
Which, that's their attempt at germ theory. They're understanding that it's moving without physical touch from person to person. And so their way of explaining it is the humors, the miasmas, the air flow in general.
Right.
Which isn't untrue, it's just not the whole story.
The doctor has Tindaro, completely believing that he is, like, in the worst health of all time.
Which actually turns out to just be a great racket for the doctor, and that's just not untrue either. Rich people, they had the money to experiment, and the things that they're experimenting with are brand new and, of course, unregulated. Like, if you had, to take a great gross example, if you had syphilis as a poor person, it's going to suck and it's probably going to kill you. You're at least going to have the organic arc of the disease. If you're rich, you're going to go to your doctor and say, man, I really want my penis to feel better. And he's going to go, aha, I have the thing, but it's going to cost the earth. And you're going to say, aha, but that's okay. I'm rich enough and I really care about my penis. And he's going to stick a syringe up your dick and put mercury in it.
Yep.
Now, which guy got off better? They're both going to die of syphilis, but one of them had a way worse time.
Right. So, after doing that, they've also got this little thing where Licia is dumping the body of her girlfriend. And where does the body land? Right smack on top of the body of Leonardo.
Who's been dead this whole time.
He's dead. And the servants are hiding it because they're very well aware that the next person with a claim to it decides their fate.
Absolutely, and has no incentive to keep them at all. They have loyalties to a different household. They don't know them. They don't have to care about them, and they have no legal obligation to keep them on. They're absolutely getting kicked to the curb the very minute a new person steps in and says, I own this house.
Yeah.
So it's very much in their best interest to just say, he's off buying glassware.
Yeah. So then a couple of more things happen. We find out that Holy Roller is one massive ball of hormones.
My gosh. Like that had to have been the case so often. It's not like it's something that we would really, like, get the story of. It's a really personal struggle.
Yeah.
But how many women in the Middle Ages didn't even realize that sex existed, then were shoved into a legal arrangement wherein sex was required in order to seal the deal? Then the rest of their life's purpose is supposed to revolve around growing the fruits of that experience that no one told them was going to happen in the first place.
Yep.
And your sexuality is never, ever considered a piece of your being, but obviously doesn't stop existing. You must have so many women walking around just wondering and seeing weird cause and effects and never having them explained. Like in Ghosts when she discovers the dryer.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So that's happening, and we know this. It all comes to a head because the doctor, who's pretty hot, is he bathing?
The doctor is amazingly hot, and yes, he's bathing.
He's bathing, and in one room, we've got Holy Roller watching him. Somewhere else, we have Holy Roller's husband
from a totally different window, and they're both wanking off to the same guy.
Right. For some reason, because it's her sin, she literally runs through the kitchen, grabs the very now burnt to a crisp suckling pig, goes running out of the castle with it, and I wasn't sure what she was planning on doing.
I have no idea what the plan was.
They still haven't said.
With the pig, I don't know why the pig was involved.
I don't know why the pig was involved either, but she runs out the door and down a path, and there is a well in the middle of this path. Is it waist high? Yes. Does she run into it and flip over into the edge?
Yeah, absolutely.
With the pig.
With the pig. I don't know what the point of the pig was, but it did actually save her because then she has a pig raft.
It does. She has a pig raft. And cut back to the doctor. Now the doctor's patient, Tindaro, has decided he's going to court fake
Philomena, otherwise known as Leicester.
Right.
And the names are just hard to keep
track
of.
But fake Philomena and the doctor, have they already hooked up at this point, or just with their eyes?
They're definitely flirting. He knows he's merchant class, and he knows that he's just on the hustle, and that's his life. She is acting the same way because that's been her life up until now, and then now she has all of the license of the money to back it.
Right.
And so they're a good match. They both have very similar temperaments when it comes to the situation.
So the doctor comes out and he's wearing a codpiece.
Codpieces are amazing.
And what was he doing? He's like acting out a story Tindaro was telling her or something?
Yeah, Tindaro wanted to do a dynamic storytelling, but did not have the robust constitution to do all of the acting, and so his doctor's doing that for him.
Right. So she is loving life right then. But codpieces, is that a thing of the time?
Absolutely. Totally accurate. So, in terms of foundation garments, most things that most guys are going to wear, the base is going to be like a long linen shirt.
Okay.
And then you're going to tie that in between your legs, and that's going to protect your goods.
Girt your loins.
Gird your loins. That's where that. Yep. Mm-hmm. Over time, you get variety of protective pouches, and that becomes a little bit more visible in your fashion, and then, of course, guys being guys, it becomes a literal dick measuring contest.
Hot doctor being hot doctor.
It's one that you're allowed to have in public. It's not, we would never have how great is my fake dick.
No,
fashion
have
contest.
Truck balls.
Right, it's like having truck balls that are allowed in a boardroom.
Yeah. They make crock balls, which I find horrifying.
Do they really?
Yeah, so I was at church last week. And after church, I was talking to one of my friend's kids. He's like 12 or something. And I looked down and he's wearing two completely different Crocs. And I was all, nice shoes. And he's like, yeah, my mom said not to wear this pair that I was going to wear because the other one has this like great big gibbet on it. And she didn't want it to like fall off and go clunking across the hardwood floors. And I was like, oh, fair. So he just changed the one shoe.
That's such a teenager thing to do.
I know. And his mom was like, yeah, it's one of those like headlights you can put on your Crocs. And I was like, those are super cool. And his mom leans over and goes, I got my nephew Croc balls. And her poor son like dies right there on the spot. He's so embarrassed. And she's like, yeah, but my nephew won't wear them. And I'm all, girl, those are disgusting.
No, don't encourage that. I saw this kid in Target the other day that he was like walking his bike through the line, and he had two just regular nuts and bolts nuts like held with baling wire to the bottom of his seat. And I get what he was going for, but the placement was too far back, so it just looked like he'd eaten a lot of metal and was having a real unfortunate time getting rid of it.
Ew.
It's not cute.
No, it's not.
Yeah, and I can't judge entirely because I wear a vulva necklace on a regular basis.
There you go.
So, yeah.
Today you're wearing the tea necklace that I got you.
Yeah, I love this.
So back to the Decameron, a couple more things. Dull husband, I love him. Panfilo finally realizes that his wife is definitely missing and not doing long penance, and he hears her praying or singing and finds her in the well. And he's like, oh my goodness, I'm going to get some rope.
No, don't save me. I am here because God is testing me, and you saving me doesn't prove anything, so I need to save myself. And she's
like, God is literally going to save me. And first thing I said, you know that little parable story about the three boats? If you don't know it, I'm going to tell it to you right now. So this guy is in the middle of the ocean, and he's on a life raft, and he's like, oh, praying, Lord, please help me, get me out of here. And the boat comes by, and they're like, hey, dude, let's pick you up. And he's like, no, God's going to save me. And then he does that 2 more times. So he dies. And when he's at the pearly gates, he's like, why didn't you save me? And God's like leans over, yells over Peter. And he's like, homie, I sent 3 boats. Right, come on.
Don't look the miracle in the teeth.
Right. Then
there's a really cute scene where he just goes, okay, honey, and then retreats to within hearing distance, but not into where she can see him, and just sits all day and reads a book and lets her do what she needs to do, even if he doesn't agree with it or think it's even really rational. He's gonna let her be her own being.
Right, he's a good husband. Yes, he does that and is super cute. And while he's doing that, Amicia and the manservant of the house, they take Pampanea on a picnic, in which they say, oh, guess what? Leonardo's dead.
They realize they can't hide it for very much longer without somebody that knows about the situation being at a higher level of social class. Like, they need to have somebody in on the con that has the clout to run the place. She has no idea how to get a suckling pig, started on time. No. But she does know how to talk to the other members of her social class to stop them from claiming the villa or realizing that Leonardo's dead. She's got different skill sets that they need. Yeah. So then they fake a wedding!
Yeah. They come back, and this might be into episode 3, but they come back the next day and they're like, wait till dinner, and they're like, we went and saw him yesterday and we were so in love, we just got married. Because that way now she's got a legit claim, and both of them are like, great, she's on our side, perfect, this is how we're gonna do it.
You've got his steward who knows his signature. You have the household manager's word, and she can swear that they consummated it.
Yep.
You've got his steward faking his signature. Like, you've got everything you need for a fake marriage.
Yeah. Scene cut back to the well. Tell us what happens.
It's not going great with God rescuing her from the well, and so she starts doing crazier things like, well, I'm going to go under the water, and then you save me, and almost drown and come back up like, that was really close, God, you're kind of pushing it.
And her husband's like, no. He gets up and walks off. He's like, time. We're resolving this now.
So he goes to the doctor and says, hey, can you help me out? And so the doctor comes running up, shirtless, of course, leans over the well, and says, God told me to come here, and now I see why. I must save you. He saves Holy Roller, and she has even more conflicting feelings about him now because she's still very sexually attracted to him, but he's also now instrumental in what she believes to be a miracle.
Yeah, he carries her off. Does he dry her off?
Yeah, he's a player. He is. He's been seducing noblemen's wives for long before this story.
Right.
So he's kind of getting into it, like, oh, wow, Holy Roller, let's see how far you'll let me get. But then she gets even, like, a little too creepy for his taste.
Yeah. And she freaks out and runs off, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Her husband comes in and he looks at the doctor and he's like, I didn't ask you to take your shirt off.
Like, which is hilarious because he's not sexually interested in his wife, but damned if anybody else should be. Boy, isn't that a familiar story.
Right. Although I did wonder, I'm like, what would he have done if she had been like, let's do it. Consummation time.
Honestly, who knows? They probably have had to do it at least once.
Yeah.
Because that's what actually makes the marriage legal.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. If you just have the paperwork and you can prove that it wasn't consummated, that's like one of the few reasons you can get a Catholic divorce.
All right, break time. Yeah. Because we've been at this for now and we've hit 2 episodes.
We might have to do a 3-parter.
Yeah.
All right, well, join us next time for part 2 of Decameron
and the Hot Doctor. And everything goes off the rails in episode 4. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.